Thank you, Stan. Today we heard the updated cost of next stage tax cuts will be about $254 billion over the next 10 years. Should the new government abandon some or all of these tax cuts to fund other important initiatives such as fighting climate change, easing cost of living, providing cheaper childcare and fully funding NDIS?
Chris. Chris, that applause tells us something, and I can tell you every single week we get this question. And often from people who say they would benefit from the tax cut and they don't want it. Given what we're seeing in the economy, given that we've seen an increase now in what they're going to cost announced this week, why not scrap them?
Well, we're going to implement our election commitments, which include delivering those tax cuts, but also include big increase in childcare support, which I'm sure will be the centrepiece of the budget on Tuesday night, which is, you know, we went to the people with a very strong childcare policy and we're funding and implementing. Climate change policies across the board, including the big announcement the Prime Minister and I made yesterday in Hobart for that multi-billion-dollar investment. All these things we are going to do, but we're also going to hold to the promises we made.
Wouldn't it be nice to get $254 billion, though, to spend on other things rather than hand it to people on $200,000 a year to get $9,000 extra in their pay packet?
Well, Stan, you can ask the new government to renege on election promise. That's your right, but I'm going to respectfully disagree.
I mean, I don't know many young people who earn $120,000. If anyone knows anybody who earns that much, please tell me, because we're seeing the cost of living going up and the government's introduced stage 3 tax cuts. We know that it's so expensive to just make day-to-day ends meet for so many people. We know that climate disasters have made that work because people have literally lost their houses. And on top of all of that, it's just, you know, things like mental health, things like climate change, they can all be funded much more effectively. And, you know, money is always an issue for us, and we're saying that we don't have enough budget or we don't have enough money to allocate to so many issues that are far more pressing and much more necessary. But instead, we're once again prioritizing the rich instead of the rest of the community.
Anthony, I want to just come back to Branko in just a moment, but Anthony, as a young and aspiring politician, I'm sure you've got your eyes set beyond just being a mayor. Chris Bowen said you can't break a promise, an election promise. Is this one the government should think about breaking?
Look, if this promise is going to be a cost-shifting measure where you put it on state and then they shove it onto local government, how are they going to deliver on their own services that they provide? We're the ones on the ground giving all this support, especially when it comes to the elderly community as well, when they need assistance with maintenance in their homes or even simply food deliveries. We're the ones having to pay for that, and then they're shoving us. One of the many things that have come through recently is the need for municipal building surveys that costs hundreds and thousands of dollars, which then ratepayers have to pay through, which then we hear about, which then we have to do cuts to other services that we provide. It's a cost-shifting measure that has to be addressed at some stage, and it is something that I think, at the bare minimum, should be reconsidered.
But Branko, what's led you to the belief that they should reconsider this? Because it was something that the government took to the election. It was a promise that they said that they would honour, the tax cuts left over from the previous government. Why do you think there's a need to change now? I
mean, I think it's a need to change because, like I said, obviously, when the tax cut was introduced back in 2018, was different circumstances. Now I had COVID, got this inflation, and I mean, Stan, I was a high-income earner myself, and I think even going back when the tax cuts were announced, I thought they were far too generous to the high-income earners, and that I would have been quite happy to forego those tax cuts so they can be spent on things like childcare, things like, I said, the climate change, and things like that. So that's why.
Ross Garnaut, the budget next week, and the Treasurer has said this will be a bread and butter budget, and you need to have adult conversations with people right now. You raised the prospect a little bit earlier, I think, about a global recession. We're seeing the impacts of rising inflation around the world. Australia's carrying a lot of post-COVID carryover debt. Is this something that you would like to see go, the stage 3 cuts?
Well, there's a more general question. Australians are kidding themselves that we can have all the services that we want and for very good reasons, want and get by with the current level of taxation and have economic stability at the same time. We need to pay a fair bit more tax. We pay on average 5.7% of our incomes less than the average for the developed countries, and the income tax on higher income earners is one of the areas, but it's only one of a lot of income, a lot of areas in which taxation could be adjusted. We've had huge increases in profits, unprecedented, completely unanticipated as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine with the very high coal and gas prices. That's flowing through to profits beyond any hope or expectation of the companies involved. So there's a whole lot of areas where I think in this adult conversation, we will have to stop kidding ourselves about how we fund all the things we as a society think we need.
You mentioned before, you and I'll just... I'll finish with you on this because you raised the prospect of inequality and the impact it'll have in China. We've seen the rampant inequality in the United States that's really created so much political upheaval there, and we're seeing growing wealth gap in Australia as well. How much, when you look at tax cuts, and clearly there's a mood in the room that they would like to see these gone, particularly tax cuts for the rich, how great of a problem to democracy, to countries like Australia, is inequality?
Inequality is a great problem because it creates a division. People can no longer relate to each other when there's such a widening gap between them. So I think that's the problem that we really needs to be addressed. And taxation is one part of it. Another is, of course, the welfare transfer system. So we need to use both of them to address this problem of inequality in Australia to ensure that our democracy is as robust as ever.